Okay, great. We are now live with the recording and everything, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. This is one of our CompuScholar monthly enrichment webinars, and today we're going to be talking about teaching web design with HTML and CSS. So by way of quick introductions, my name is Chris Youst. I'm the president of the company, and I've spent many years writing code for a living in the software industry, and a number of years as well writing curriculum for middle and high school students. So if you have any questions for me, I do enjoy interacting with teachers, so you're always welcome to send an email my way, and the address is here. You can also reach me through the website. Okay, a couple of logistical notes. I do have everybody muted, so if you would like to ask a question, I do encourage that throughout. You don't have to wait till the end. So as soon as you find something that you want to talk about, please do just drop that there in the chat window. Again, we are recording it. In the unlikely case that something happens technically and we can't reconnect here in a few minutes, we will continue the session recorded offline and then post it when we are done. So again, just please drop notes in the chat window, and we'll go from there. All right, so we're excited about our Teacher Success Program. This is the first full year that we've really rolled it out. So we do have a dedicated customer service representative that tries to reach each of our teachers on a regular basis. We do want to partner with you as regularly as we can. And so these monthly webinars are an opportunity to share some topics with you and get your feedback as well. So if there are things that you particularly want us to talk about in the coming months, please do drop us a line and make a suggestion, and we are happy to do that. We do have a list there on our website, but that's subject to change if somebody comes up with a really cool idea that we want to do later. All right, and I can hear there's some other people trickling in and joining the call. So just to recap, everybody's muted. Please go ahead and drop questions and comments in the chat window. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay, and you should be able to see my screen as well. All right, so what are we going to cover today? We'll talk about web design conceptually. What is it, and why would we want to teach it, and why in particular do we favor teaching HTML instead of more of a drag and drop approach? We will spend maybe 10 or 15 minutes doing a simple coding demo. So if you've never seen HTML before, we're going to pull up a text editor and pound out some HTML tags and show you the results in the web browser. So the goal there is to help you understand what a student experience can be like when you're teaching this in your classroom. We'll also talk through some of the common tools that you'll need and things that you'll need in your classroom to get started. Unfortunately, that's very lightweight. And then, as we always do, we'll save a few minutes at the end for a general purpose CompuScholar Forum. So if there's questions that you have for us that do not match, one moment please, I apologize. Okay, sorry about that. First rule of conferences is always to turn your phone on mute, and I failed to do that. Okay, so anyhow, we'll save a few minutes at the end for the CompuScholar Forum, and then if you've got questions that are not related to this topic but are related to CompuScholar in general, we'd love to hear those as well. All right. So why on earth would you want to teach web design if you are considering doing this in your school or in your district? In our experience, this is something that kids actually really enjoy. In my own personal experience, for example, I was at a Scout summer camp, and I was assisting with one of their STEM programs. And when the kids got into the small web design portion of the STEM activity, they were rolling the aisles and having a great time. With putting some images up there and finding some Minecraft videos and embedding those in the pages. So it was really a lot of fun for them. It's this sort of thing where you get a lot of instant visual feedback, right? So you are very quickly coding and looking at what you've done on the page, and usually there's something visual there that you're doing. It's not a more abstract, data-driven algorithm type of subject. It's actually very simple to teach web design because you don't need a compiler. You can, if you want to, use software that's completely built in your operating system with nothing else to install. So you just need to be able to let kids type into a text editor and then look at the results in a web browser. You certainly can use more advanced software if you want to, but it's not required. And then one of the key things is we use web browsers every day. We're browsing on our smartphones, we're browsing on our computers. The kids are totally in bed with this technology, even if they don't realize it. So, it's certainly great for kids to have some understanding of what's going on under the covers as they browse through the web today. And then the last point I wanted to make is that some web design skills are actually generally required for software engineers. So if you've got a student that is a budding coder and they really want to go into software engineering for a living, even if they're not a great graphics artist, they're not, consider themselves to be a designer, they will almost certainly at some point in their careers be asked to create HTML code. This is something I've had to do multiple times myself in various projects, despite having no formal training in HTML. It's something that's easy to pick up, but if you don't know it in advance, you're not comfortable with it in advance, it can be a bit of a hurdle for you. So it is definitely not uncommon for software engineers to have to write code to produce HTML and that sort of thing. So a lot of good reasons to at least introduce kids to web design, and it's a pretty lightweight introduction to computer science in general. So the approach that we favor is actually hand coding in HTML instead of getting something like Adobe Dreamweaver and showing them how to drag and drop. And certainly there's a good conversation around that. We really like kids to pound out some HTML so they have a real good understanding of the technology. If they're just dragging and dropping and they don't understand what's going on under the covers, a lot of times they won't be able to fix things. We also really want to prepare kids for the jobs that we know for certain are out there. And so somebody that is a programmer and able to write code generally has a very, very wide range of job opportunities that are high-paying jobs. I'm not as confident on the designer front, although I will freely admit that's not my expertise. But CompuScholar is about producing computer scientists as opposed to graphic artists. And so, we really want kids to understand the code as well. And by the way, if anybody has any other reasons or questions or comments, pros or cons, again, don't be bashful about just dropping those there in the chat window, and I'll keep an eye on that. As I mentioned, even if you are using a more advanced tool like Adobe Dreamweaver to produce a web page, it is really, really useful to understand what it's doing on your behalf and to be able to go in there and fix and tweak things that it's doing for you. Sometimes it's just much easier to edit some HTML code than it is to try and figure out the arcane sequence that you need to use in Dreamweaver to get it to do something for you. And so here at CompuScholar, we have obviously created quite a few web pages in terms of our course material, and we do use Dreamweaver for that. But we're usually doing it in a split screen mode where we're editing a visual document, and at the same time we can see the code on the right and make any adjustments that are necessary. But if you don't start off with hand coding HTML, it can be a little intimidating. And then I do want to mention that, again, as a software engineer, you will almost certainly be responsible at some point in your life for programmatically generating HTML. So, websites these days are running on PHP and other server-side scripting that turns around and produces HTML. So it's fairly rare that you'll have a commercial website that's just static HTML pages. It's all data-driven stuff. And if you don't know how to produce the HTML to get the effects that you want, you don't have an opportunity there for that drag and drop environment. Okay, so that's kind of our big picture motivation. That's why we offer web design here at CompuScholar and why we're excited about it. I am going to switch over and actually do a coding demo now. So for those of you that have never done HTML at all before, this will be new. For some of you, this will be old hat, so I appreciate your patience. I am going to code up a very simple web page, and I don't have a topic selected yet. So in the next 30 seconds or so, if you want to drop a suggested topic here in the chat window, I'll try and do something ad hoc around that topic. If I don't get any suggestions, I'll pick something. This is always entertaining, doing a live demo when I don't know the topic yet. So if you want to challenge me, I've had people in the past ask me to do topics like blacksmithing and that sort of stuff. So go ahead and drop a suggestion there in the chat window if you have one. All right, so let's switch over. I'm going to minimize the PowerPoint here for a moment, and we're going to pull up a project here. So when your kids are developing HTML, the way we like to do it is, they're just creating HTML files on their computer. They're not publishing them online. There's no security risks. They're just looking at HTML pages on the computer. So you do want to keep those nice and organized. We generally recommend creating some sort of working directory that you're going to store all of your different projects in. And then you can create a separate directory underneath that for each one of your websites. So if you wanted to create a new website, for example, you would create a directory here for that website. And nobody's dropped a suggestion in the chat window, so I'll just go ahead and do something on, Game of Thrones. All right, new folder, Game of Thrones. All right, so when you are creating a website, usually the home page is called index.html. So we can, again, create a new text document. Let's call it index.html. I'm going to delete that text on the end. So my Windows File Explorer is configured to show me the full file extensions, and we highly, highly recommend that you do that on your own computers as well. So by default, both Windows and Mac OS will hide the .html extension from you. So view file name extensions is unchecked, right? So definitely go in here and check that, and there's an equivalent on the Mac. And just make sure you can see those full file extensions. Otherwise, students will always end up creating files that are called index.html.txt or something like that, and they can never figure out what's wrong. All right, so in terms of a text editor, you can use anything you want. Both Windows and Mac OS have text editors that are built in, Notepad on Windows and TextEdit on a Mac. So we'll start off and just use Notepad here. If you are using TextEdit on a Mac, be aware that there are some configuration changes that you will need to make to keep it from inserting smart quotes and fancy dashes and stuff like that on your behalf. None of that will work in HTML. But once you get TextEdit configured, then you can certainly use it just like you would Notepad. So let's go ahead and open this up in Notepad. Open, let's see, documents, my web projects, Game of Thrones, and all files, index.html. Okay, so we're starting off with a blank page, and the way we do it, the students will start off with a blank page as well. And the first thing we're going to do is type one little arcane line here just to let the web browser know what version of HTML we're using. There have been different versions of HTML over time with 4 and 5 and so forth. So I'm just going to do doc type HTML, and this tells the web browser that we're using HTML5. So there's a couple of interesting things to notice here. One is you've got these opening and closing angle brackets. Those are critical, and you'll see those throughout your HTML code. So anytime you're adding an HTML tag or an element, that will be surrounded by the angle brackets there. Okay, so you can picture a web page kind of like a refrigerator. The web page itself is your outer refrigerator that contains everything else. And then inside you have a number of different containers. You might have a freezer and a refrigerator area. And in each of those areas, you have smaller and smaller containers, like a box of, raisins or something like that, or a leftover container of lasagna. So you've got a bunch of different things in there, and web pages are the same way. You'll have what we call elements that can contain other elements. So these are like bigger boxes that contain smaller boxes. So we'll go ahead and create the first, or the outermost element, HTML. And so there's an opening tag with angle brackets. And you always want to close your tags as well. So we'll do this. And I'm going pretty fast just to give you an idea of the sorts of things the students will be doing. I'm not actually trying to teach you HTML here at the moment. In our own courses, we would go more carefully through this. But big picture is you want this outermost HTML wrapper around your whole page. And on the inside, we'll have a head area. We'll have a body area. And I have boosted the font here in Notepad, so hopefully it comes through okay there on your screen. Now, the sorts of things that you would place in your head, by and large, don't show up on your web page at all. This is metadata, author information, encoding information, keywords, that sort of stuff. The one thing you can do that will have a visible impact is add a title. All right, so let's save this file, save. And then come back over here and just double click on the index.html. All right, so hopefully you can see that there's a giant blank web page here. And the only thing that's visible is the Game of Thrones title. right? So you can add that title element and impact the title there in the tab. And that's about it in the head page. There's a lot more you can do, but we'll leave that for the longer course. All right, so what I've demonstrated is actually a pattern that's very, very easy and quick for your students. So I actually have my index page up here in the code editor and in Notepad on the right, and then in the web page on the left. So any changes that you can make here in the code, let's go ahead and add something to the body. Okay, so I've just added some text there in the body. And I say that as a guy that's read all the books but hasn't watched any of the episodes. I just want the next book to come out and to wrap that series up. So we're going to save this and then just come over to the web browser. The file's already loaded, and hit F5. All right, so again, this is a pattern that's really easy for your students. Type some text in the text editor, save it, come over here and refresh in your web browser. And again, you get that immediate visual feedback. The plain text itself is very boring, and there's no way to control what the browser is going to do with it. There's some default wrapping. So what you're doing big picture when you're developing a web page is not only are you putting in content here, but you're also adding HTML tags to guide how that content is going to be displayed. So if we wanted to, for example, make the Game of Thrones bold, we can add an HTML element called strong here. And we'll surround the Game of Thrones, and we'll save it, come back over here and refresh, and you can see that's now in bold. So there's all sorts of things that you can do with HTML to control the way your text appears on the screen. Let's see, let's add a headline, H1. Save that, come back over here and refresh. And now we've got a headline. So an H1 headline is a primary headline within the document. And by default, the browsers will display that with a bigger, bolder font and some extra spacing around it. Let's see, what else do we want to show you? Just very, very briefly. We can do some lists. Let's see. Let's add a list here. An unordered list. Okay, and then each item in the list will be surrounded by this list item element. And it's been a long time since I've read the books, so somebody can help me out here, shout out a couple of character names in the chat window. I recall there were some dogs. I don't recall any of the dog names. There's a white wolf. And all sorts of people that got themselves killed off. I do recall the dwarf. I don't recall his name. Let's see. Just add the last name there of the family because I can't remember anybody else. Tyrion, thank you. Right, let's save this. We'll come over here. And now we've made a list. You can make it a numbered list. You can mess with the bullets. There's a lot of things that you can do here. So I'm not going to go too far into HTML elements. Again, I just wanted to give you a feel for the sorts of things that your students can do and how quickly you can go back and forth and teach them new concepts. Hyperlinks are good. So let me do that one last thing. Let's add a hyperlink here. So let's say we wanted to make a hyperlink out of this word here. A hyperlink is actually an anchor. A href will tell us where to go. And then this is the display text. All right, anybody know the website for the Game of Thrones off the top of their head? If not, we'll find it real quick here. The website for the series. Okay, it's not the book, but it'll do. Right, so pasted the URL in there, saved it, refreshed it, and now this is a URL. You can click on it, and you can go to that website. All right, we'll go back. Okay, so I think that's enough in terms of the HTML elements. Again, if y'all have any questions or there are particular things that you want to see, please let me know. I was going to show you some styles and some background color next, as that's kind of the main second part of HTML is impacting the appearance of these things on the website. So when you want to do things like change the color or size of the elements on the screen, generally you'll use what is called cascading style sheets or CSS rules. There are several ways you can apply those. One of those is inline here. So you can say style equals and then give it a color red, right? Because everybody's getting killed off and it's a bloody series, so we'll make that red. Okay, easy enough. We've just applied a style to this one particular element and made it red. So you may also want to apply styles to a whole group of items, and you don't want to have to cut and paste that style everywhere. So you can actually come back up into the head area, and you can add some style rules. Oops. Okay. And what we want to do, let's select all of the list item elements, and we're going to set up a rule here where we want the color to be green. We'll save that, come back over here and refresh, and you can see there's one that has hyperlink property still, but the other ones, all of the list items have turned green. And you can add as many different types of things in here as you want. You can set the font size to be 50%, and we can set the background color to yellow. Okay, so now it's bigger, and now the background color is in yellow. So these style rules, again, are ways that you can impact everything on a page. So we've shown you how to impact a single element with an inline style. We've showed you how to add an embedded style rule that will impact everything on the page. And you can also move these style rules to an external file. So you can move these to a CSS file, and then instead of embedding the actual rule here, you would just link to that file. So typically a large website would link to one or more style sheets or CSS files that control the appearance of every page on the site. So if you decide your background needs to be blue instead of yellow for all of your list items, you can make that change once in your CSS file, and then every page that links to that will automatically get that update. So that's kind of the professional way to do it, so to speak. All right. Let's see. I can show you how to do images and videos, but I think I'm going to skip over that. I'll take a brief pause here, and I'm actually going to move, I think, away from the HTML coding and talk a little bit about tools and things like that. But I did want to pause and give you an opportunity if there's something else that you want to see. If you strongly want to see an image, I can certainly show you that. And that's where the kids really start getting tickled, actually, is when they start putting images that they've scraped from somewhere up on the web page, and they really seem to like that. But that's pretty easy to do. All right, I haven't seen any questions there in the chat window, so let me go back to the PowerPoint here real quick. And let's continue where I left off. Okay, so we've done the coding demo. We've shown you the syntax. You have some idea of a typical student experience. So what would you need to teach web design on your own in terms of the tools in the classroom? So you will need some sort of text editor. I demonstrated Notepad, and that's what we used during the first semester of our web design course. You can also install kind of a lightweight editing tool like Komodo Edit, or you can use something that's very heavyweight like Dreamweaver. So it depends on how much money you want to spend and what level of functionality you want your kids to have. And then in terms of image editors, there's Paint that's built into Windows. You can install paint.net that I really like. I'll show you these in a moment. And then web browsers, obviously any web browser that you've got on your computer will do. So let me switch over here and just cycle through these real quick. So I've shown you Notepad for editing. Let me pull up Komodo Edit here. So this is Komodo Edit, and we're looking at one of the projects that we have off to the side here. So it's a somewhat nicer way to work with your HTML files. It does color syntax highlighting. There is a browser preview feature in here somewhere. Let me see if I can do this. Yep, there we go. So you can make changes up here and then preview the changes right here within the tool if you want to do that. You can also create new pages based on templates and that sort of thing. So it's not a drag and drop WYSIWYG sort of editor, but it is something that gives you some nicer tools in terms of actually writing the HTML code. So this is Komodo Edit, and it is a free package that runs both on Windows and Mac OS. The folks that make it are constantly trying to sell you a paid IDE, but you don't need to download that. You just get the free editor and you'll be fine. All right. And then lastly, let's show you Dreamweaver. I think I have that up as well. Here we go. So I mentioned that we use Dreamweaver ourselves. I've got one of our lessons loaded up here in the editor. So this is almost a word processing view here where you can see what it's actually going to look like more or less in the web browser. But you can also come over here to the code and make fine-tuned tweaks to the code. So I think a lot of professionals use this. We use it ourselves. And it's the sort of thing where if you have it in your district, you've already paid for it and you want to use it, you're certainly encouraged to do that. The only thing that, from our perspective, we would caution you is, we really want the kids to learn the HTML code. So we would recommend you spend most of your time in the code editor and allowing them to write code, and then they can see the effect over here in the design panel or pull it up in the web browser. So those are at least 3 different tools that you can use for writing your code, and there are many, many more out there. Notepad++, there's all sorts of coding-oriented text editors. My favorite is UltraEdit, so I'll give them a little plug. There's all sorts of things out there that you can use if you have a preference for that. All right, so those are your text editors. Now let's talk about images. So I didn't put an image on the page, and I'm kind of regretting it. So let me go ahead and do that real quick, because I want to show you how your students can actually get an image. So you can pull images from just about anywhere. Not all students are creative and want to make their own images. You can go to images, google.com, right, and search for Game of Thrones and see what we come up with. All right, there's a classic. So I'm going to save the image, and I want to save it. Documents, my web projects. There we go. Game of Thrones. We'll call it Game of Thrones.jpg. Right, so it's really easy to lift an image online. Obviously, you're not going to do this for any sort of production commercial environment. There's intellectual property rights and that sort of thing you got to be very careful of. But if you're just doing a personal or student project that you're hacking together that's not going to be published online, there's all sorts of things that you can find online. All right, so go back to our directory. You can see right next to my index.html, I've got Game of Thrones.jpg. So let's edit that page and add an image. I'll come down here. Good, a question came in, should students create a separate image folder within their root directory? That is a great question, and it is a matter of preference. So what you will see here in very, very simple websites is sometimes you'll have half a dozen files just all sitting here in the root directory, and that's about it. We do encourage students in our own class to start creating subdirectories to hold things and start getting them in the habit of separating that stuff out. So for example, new folder, you could do new site style folder, and then you would drop like your CSS files in here. You could do new folder, images, and then let's move this image up there. All right, so now we have our image in an image subfolder. And when you're working professionally and you have a site with dozens and dozens of pages and images and CSS files running everywhere, it certainly pays to keep yourself organized like that. All right, so back in our HTML, let's add a image, img, source equals, and we'll give it the path to our file, images/got.jpg. And I think that will do it if I haven't left anything out. Not that one. You have to bear with me as I do all this live. There we go. Okay, very good. You always keep your fingers crossed when you're doing something live to make sure you didn't forget anything. So this is, very simply, we haven't done any positioning or captioning or anything like that, but we now have an image here. And what your students will find is that very frequently they're going to want to modify an image even if they didn't create it on their own. So how would you modify this image, for example, to crop out something? Let's go back to our folder, Game of Thrones, images, and I'm just going to pull it up. And I'm actually using paint.net here as my default image editor. Again, I really like that. But there's a bunch of them out there, and I'm sure you already have a personal preference. So it is, in my opinion, it's useful for students to have some access to and some familiarity with an image editor. You can use the Paint image editor that's built into Windows, although I don't think that does transparency. There's something comparable that's built into the Mac. You can install paint.net on Windows. You can install GIMP just about anywhere. So there's a bunch of image editors out there. You can also do it online, right? You can search for image editing online, and there's all sorts of online services that you can use that are pretty powerful, and you don't have to install any software locally. All right, so let me just crop this out real quick. That's what I want. All right, save it. And we'll come back here, and all I have to do is refresh my page, and it's gonna pick up that new image. Now, some of you are probably jumping up and down, wondering why I didn't specify the size here, and you can certainly do that. So you can set a width equals some number of pixels, height equals some number of pixels. You can give it a text description as well for screen readers. That's very important for accessibility. Let's see what the width and height is. 153 by 168. 153 by 168. So we shouldn't see any effect here if I got the image correct, size correct, and I did. We could double the size and stretch it out if we wanted to. So make the width bigger, and it just stretches it out. Right? So there's a lot of games you can play here. All right. So anyhow, so that's the image, and I did want to add that specifically just to talk about image editors and how useful they are. In our own courses, we will always provide all the graphics and collateral that students will need. Again, because we don't expect them to be artists or to have to go off and find things. Although if they are an artist or they do want to go off and find things, then we would encourage that as well. All right, and then the last point is the web browser. So we talked about code editor, we talked about image editors, and then the last would be a web browser, right? And so this, I think, is Firefox. And if I get back to my Windows Start menu, you can see I've got Firefox, Edge, Chrome, and Internet Explorer all installed here. And what you'll want to do as a web designer is actually probably have multiples installed on your computer if you can, and that way you can compare the results in each web browser and make sure that everything looks good across the web browsers. In your school, most likely you have one or two that are approved for installation on your computer, so you probably won't have 4 or 5 of them installed, but you can use just about anything. And notice up here, if you can read it, it says file instead of HTTP. So this is your indication that you're actually just looking at a local file on your file system and you're not going online to do anything. So all of our own coursework will have students working locally in their own files again, so you don't have to worry about setting up a web server or anything like that. And there's no security issues with people posting things online that you don't want them to see. So that's pretty handy. All right, any questions on tools or classroom preparation? In terms of classroom preparation, other than identifying the tools that you want to use, you just need to make sure that there's a location that your students can select for their working directories, so that maybe there's a dedicated folder with their name on it out on the network somewhere, or a local folder in their documents directory if they're working on their computer. So just make sure you understand fundamentally where your students are going to be storing their files and that they can read and write to those locations. But other than that, web design is a really easy subject to get set up, just because everything that you need for a basic class is built into your computer there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the PowerPoint here, I believe. Yep, so we talked about editors, talked about image editors, and we showed you getting something from an online source. And we talked about web browsers, so I think we're good here. If there are no more questions about tools or classroom prep, we'll go ahead and move on. So we're going to wrap up here pretty quickly. This is the CompuScholar Forum portion of it, where we just spend a few minutes with a couple of announcements. Again, I encourage questions on anything related to CompuScholar at all, or anything that you want to pick my brain on. I have deliberately not made this a sales presentation for our web design course. I just wanted you to get a feel for the web design experience and how easy it is. And if you are interested in that, certainly let us know. So by way of announcements, I do encourage you to check out the blog posts. We're starting to post more regularly on our blog about topics of interest, so take a look at that from our main website. I do want to let you know also that we are amidst a big upgrade on our web design instructional videos. So the instructional videos on our web design course have been there for quite some time, and we are busy replacing all of those with new videos that will be less animation and more screencasts. So we're recording ourselves doing demonstrations and things similar to what you've seen today, and that will be the kind of the new theme for the web design videos. So we're pretty excited about that. And I will mention that the upcoming topic for March is going to be flipped into hybrid classrooms. An online system like we have is something that lends itself pretty well to that sort of arrangement. So if you're interested in that topic, please join us in March. If you have experience in that topic, so if you have run a flipped or a hybrid classroom and you want to contribute or share your thoughts, please do contact us in advance. We'd love to have you on to talk about your experience and what worked for you and what didn't work for you. Okay, so I have run off my list of things to talk about. I'll pause here for a few more seconds to see if anybody else wants to drop questions in the chat window. Now is your time. And again, if you think of something about 2 minutes after we hang up here, don't be bashful about reaching out to me personally through the website or directly by email. I'm always happy to chat that way. Broken images. So is the question, how would a broken image appear on the web page? Is that what we want to take a look at? All right, let's go do that real quick. So there's a question about how our broken image is handled. So you can see there's the image path was successful and I correctly identified that image. Let's go back to our web design page and let's mess up our path a little bit, right? So instead of the correct path into our images subdirectory, I've got the wrong directory name here. So it's not going to be able to find it. We'll save those changes, come back over here and refresh. So the image is gone, obviously, because the web browser can't find it. And in its place, what you see is the alt tag that we put here. So if you're ever on a web page and the images aren't loading correctly, but you see some text in the place of it, that's where the text is coming from, is these alt tags. If you specify a width and a height like this, then the web browser will be able to still allocate that space. So let me show you down here. Let's add a paragraph with some extra text. Oh, I misspoke. What did I do wrong? Maybe I missed the pixels. All right. I'm missing something here, but when you do specify the width and the height, the web browser should reserve that space. If you don't specify the width and the height, the only place it knows to get that from is from the image itself, and it won't be able to pre-allocate the space for it. So if you do know the width and the height, it's generally recommended that you add that. But if you leave it off, certainly the web browser will figure it out from the image, but it does have to load that image first. Did that answer your question successfully? We do see that that students do struggle from time to time with the concepts of files and folders. So we have a lesson in our own material that talks about relative paths and how to navigate up a directory structure, how to navigate down, the importance of writing correct paths. So it is not uncommon for students to enter a course and they really have no grasp of how files are laid out on the file system, or the fact that directories include other directories, and how you might navigate between directories programmatically. So we do have lesson material that is dedicated to that, and it will help you do things like form a relative path to the correct location. Okay, any other questions about anything? Okay, super. Again, if you think of something else, drop me a note. Oh, will the recording be on the CompuScholar website? Yes. So I anticipate the recording should be available later today. And so we'll get that posted up there as soon as it is available. And if you need, if you want to schedule a custom session like this for your district, we can certainly do that as well. So let me know if you need additional material or guidance around this area. Okay, all right. I don't see anything else there in the chat window, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.